What I want to do is I want to start with two little stories and statistics to get us thinking about what we do. First statistic, according to eMyth, which is an entrepreneurial think tank, every year, and they've tracked this for the last 25 years, there's 1 million businesses that incorporate every year in North America, whether it's profit, nonprofit, association, but that's 1 million. Only 20% make it to year 5. Now, the tragic stat is actually year 5 to year 10, because it goes even worse. Only 20% of these 200,000 will make it to year 10. So if you're doing the math, only 4% of businesses that start this year will see year 10. 4%. Now, there's a positive to this stat. What they did, though, is they wanted to understand why do businesses fail and why do businesses succeed. So they partnered with Harvard, and there was like a 5-year project where they were looking at data points. What do you think are the reasons why 96% fail? Solid business plan, highly appropriate given that we're doing strategy today. Yeah. Failure to adjust. What's the most famous word during this pandemic? Pivot, right? Industry connections. It's a good one. A lot of times people throw out money, right? They run them. Oh, that's a good one. Poor company structure, smart team. You don't have the right people around you. Others innovate more quickly and build a better mousetrap. I love that. Marketing, right? Here was the number one reason why businesses fail. They spend too much time working in the business versus on the business. So who's doing your strategic thinking? Who's doing your outward reaching activities? Okay. So the gift you're giving yourself today is you're working on the organization for the day. Now I'm going to give you a second stat. Johns Hopkins University Medical Center. They wanted to understand, after people have had bypass surgery, what was the percentage of people that actually made the changes that the physician recommended? So here's the deal. They've knocked on death's door. They've been given a second chance. Physician says, look, you need to exercise a bit more. I don't know, you need to stop smoking. You need to eat better. It was 11%. The gentleman, Alan Dutchman, actually wrote a book and he called it Change or Die. And he said people chose death over change. So we say we like change. We like change when it works for us. We don't like change when we can't control it, was the research. Why am I starting with two statistics that are a bit on the, let's call it, maybe negative side, if you want to look at it that way? It's because what we're going to do all day is we are going to stay in the growth mindset. We're going to look at possibilities. We're going to be optimistic. I'm choosing to go high. There's a million reasons why we could be frustrated or we could be looking at everything that went wrong. But I want to remind us of these two stats. The reason you're here today is to work on your organization. And secondly, we're going to come up with great ideas, but we have to make it easy for people around us to say yes to our ideas because people don't like change. So we have to own the no. If we make it hard for people to register, then shame on us. If we make it hard for our members to have a good user experience, then shame on us. If we don't have enough money, shame on us because we're not making it easy for other people to give us money. So again, I'm going to push us throughout the day. And that's what we're going to do together. Rebound. Ontario Trillium Foundation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. No one's on this call, but this is possible because of your support. So thank you for that. Now, here's what we're going to do today, gang. 5 big buckets. We're going to look at how do you reset your organization. And look, you're probably past the resignation phase, right? We all went through the curve as this pandemic is we're in the messy middle, unfortunately, still. But how do we make sure we go from resignation to reinvention? Because there is a massive opportunity for all of us to use this as a catalyst to say, look, we have to be better moving forward. How do we reevaluate? How do we look at what's working, what's not working? How do we reposition your organization internally, externally? What's your options? How do you then rearrange? Prioritize. When you say yes to something, what are you saying no to? Because that's very strategic. And finally, Finally, but critical to strategic thinking, is communication and accountability. So really, if you were to break this down, another way to look at it, I don't know if any one of you is familiar with Roger Martin's work, the dean of the U of T Business School, or former dean, I should say, is he's been around strategy his whole life. He wrote a great book called Playing to Win. And he said, and this was with AJ Lafley, that's the global CEO, Procter & Gamble, if you can answer these 5 questions, congratulations, you're strategic. If one of those is not answered, you're not strategic. So what we're going to do is we're going to work our way through these 5 questions from vision, right? Rally cry, what are we driving towards? Analyzing what's working, what's not against that rally cry, against that new renewed vision. Making decisions, because if you're trying to do probably more than 3 big things, then you're diluting everything and really you're doing nothing, right? You're just kind of on that treadmill working in the business. How will you make sure that happens? What capabilities, resources, support do you need? And finally, how are you going to hold yourself accountable? So vision to action. That's the journey. Now, another way to frame out strategy, if you're a visual learner, is this. That's me, right? With the little bald head. I've got a question mark. I'm trying to figure out, I want to get to X. How do I get there? Do I take the river? It might be shorter going through the desert, but it looks a bit scary there. I don't know, the sun might get warm. I think that's a scorpion. So once I choose to take the river, though, I now need to decide what's the best way to take the river. Is it swimming? Is it by boat? Is it as a team? Is it using a raft? Is it, I don't know, inventing a new device? So that's, again, another way to look at what we're going to do today. We're going to decide what that X looks like. We're going to paint a vivid picture of it. We have to make it easy for us and others to see and feel and almost smell if you want, right? Depending on what senses you use to kind of drive forward. So just quickly, I think it's important you understand where I'm coming from and where I'm challenging from. So a couple of things. I'm co-founder of a company called Blueprint. And what we do is we're extremely fortunate because we get a peak of world class every single day, whether it's working with technology companies, sports, banking, food businesses, associations. And you know what's amazing? I don't know, replace the tennis ball with software. It's still the same challenges. How well do you know your members or customers? How good are you at storytelling? How's your execution? Can you remove obstacles? Can you partner? So we're going to share all kinds of examples that are outside sport as well, because I think it helps us always in the spirit of moving forward. Now, I do want to share one more thing because I think it's important. When I opened Blueprint in 2012, prior to that, I spent my whole world in corporate world. So McCain Foods, PepsiCo, Gatorade. I was the global director of strategy, leadership, training, and development for McCain Foods. So I would travel around the world and help people do what we're doing here today. And when I decided to open Blueprint, I promised myself that I would never, ever, ever, ever advise someone or lead something unless I was feeling their pain. Because I used to hate it at McCain when we'd hire the Boston Consulting Group, the McKinseys, the big think tanks, and they'd have a great theoretical plan, and then we'd all leave there and say, but we can't do anything with that. So what you're going to see today is theory meets real world. And so what I do to make sure that I'm real world is I'm also an entrepreneur. And I'm involved in 9 different businesses, some successful, some are struggling. As my wife would joke, when are we seeing the checks from these businesses? But we're doing great things with these businesses. And one of them, I'm going to share an example here, given that it relates to sport. It's called hockeyshot.com. And what we do is we sell dry land and now on ice products to help people be the best hockey players they can be. We started in New Brunswick, in a little town, 50 people, 9 years ago. We're now a $20 million company. We're the largest in the world in terms of selling synthetic ice. We get more traffic on our website per day than Bauer gets. So just think about it. Bauer's $1 billion, we're 20 million. There's opportunities of a lifetime in front of us, gang, with social. We are outplaying to the point that Bauer's always looking and saying, how are you guys getting 180,000 views on a video? We just paid Austin Matthews $2 million and we can't even get these hits. So again, we'll share some ideas throughout the day. What you're looking at there is the Guinness Book of World Record, largest outdoor skating rink, synthetic ice in the world in Mexico City. We partnered with Mexico, and here's what we've got. And the reason we wanted to do that is we wanted to create noise, and we wanted to show the world that even though there's 10 companies selling this, that we're the best. Even though, little secret, pretty much all the synthetic ice looks the same. We're telling a better story. So there's going to be a theme here in strategy today, gang. The best story wins. It's not the best idea that wins. It's the best story that wins. So what story are you telling your members? What stories are you telling your partners? Okay, now, here's where I shared my little story, a hockey shot. I want you to think for a second. Think of companies or organizations that have totally reinvented themselves during this pandemic. So for instance, hotels are now renting hotel rooms during the day for people can use as an office. That's a reinvention. Bauer is producing face masks and making more money on that than they were on hockey helmets. Because you see, right? They've got the front line. There are opportunities out there. So let's keep moving here, okay? This is an important slide. This is an important slide for you and for the people that are part of your sport association. This is extremely important, is to understand where you're at and where the people are at within your sport. Are they in the fear zone? Are they in the learning zone? Are they in the growth zone? And whether they're ready for it or not, we're going to have to lead. And we're going to have to lead in a lot of areas. And so keep that in mind as we're going to get you to really kind of refresh your visions for your sport. But before we do the first most important exercise, a couple more things I want to introduce. I don't know if you're familiar with Carol Dweck's work at Stanford. She wrote a great book called The Mindset. And honestly, if you're a parent, coach, teacher, sports leader, human, you probably should read this book. And Carol talks about a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Notice she's not saying a positive person or negative person. She's saying, are you operating from a fixed mindset or are you operating from a growth mindset? The fixed mindset is everything's a challenge. The growth mindset, everything's an opportunity. Same situation. They're just choosing to look for the opportunity. A fixed mindset doesn't like feedback. They get very defensive. A growth mindset says, bring it on. I want to learn. A fixed mindset looks at setbacks and blames others around them. Blames the city, blames the mismanagement of the previous administration of their sport. A growth mindset says, you know what? I'm going to learn from these setbacks and I'm going to make sure that never happens again. So again, we're really going to get you to operate in that growth mindset. So every time you're going to come up with a challenge, you're going to say, great. What would the growth mindset say to that challenge? Okay. So I'm priming you a bit, but I want to make sure that all day we're going to be in that positive space. Now, this is probably my favorite slide to describe change. From my experience being around change, this plays out to a T. If you don't have a clear vision where your team, your athletes, your parents, your coaches, your volunteers are fully aligned, then you constantly have confusion. If you have the vision, but you don't have skills, creates anxiety. That's why you got to invest in your people. Incentive is what's in it for me. It doesn't mean money. If I'm not motivated, gradual change. If I have a lack of resources, frustration, that's why a lot of you are frustrated at times. I don't have a proper gym. I don't have a proper pool, right? And finally, if you don't have an action plan, false start. So we're going to work our way through this, again, in a roundabout way to make sure that you could put a green box next to each one at the top. I always tell people if you're going to print one slide or if you're going to have one thing on your desktop, this is probably the one. Because when you're not getting change, one of these boxes is missing typically. If you cannot put your strategic thinking on a napkin, let's pretend this is a napkin on one page, then you don't have strategy. You haven't made it easy for others to follow, to say yes. So we're not going to hide behind a 45-page strategic plan. We are going to boil this down to a few key components. What are we driving towards? What's the new visionary state? We're going to analyze where we're at against that, what needs to change. We're going to land on 3 to 4 strategies max. And then we're going to look at a few actions to drive those strategies with accountability. But it all starts with your vision or your rally cry. So if I were to open the door right now, I open the door, I get up, right? I open it. What are we charging towards? So the rally cry has to be a bit aspirational, inspirational, something that you're not grabbing today, but you're driving towards, that everybody knows that that's why you exist, that's why you're driven, and that's what you're trying to get to. Another way to look at it is this. Most organizations have capabilities, history, skill set that drives a behavior that drives a result. World class actually does the complete opposite. They stand in the future, they paint a vivid picture of what they want for the result, and they reverse engineer it. What behaviors, what capabilities, what skill sets do we need to make that a reality? So that's why we're going to stand in the future first. Here's what we're going to ask you to do. Pen and paper. You're not allowed to use words. So you're not allowed to use words. Only visuals. It could be stick people, right? Doesn't need to be fancy. Some of you might be artists. Some of you might not. I know I am not. So my pictures are always awful, but hopefully they lead to something. Here's what you're going to do. Don't go 5 years out. There's no way right now with everything going on. Go 12, 18, maybe 2 years out at a max. Only using visuals. Paint a vivid picture of what you want your sport to become, what you should be, what you could be. Think operationally, think people, think financially, think facilities, think partnership. Anything that you think your sport could be, I want you to put little images. Be positive here, be bold. The bolder you are in this exercise, the better your strategic thinking is going to evolve throughout the day. Okay, so this is the opportunity to really stretch yourself. We're now going to get you to go back to these visuals. And let's pretend that this was a book, okay? And these visuals represent chapters. What would you call this book? It's a book of what? What is the story? So I'll give you an example. Coca-Cola, okay? Coca-Cola's vision is what? Does anybody know what their vision is? It's one word. It's happiness. That's why, by the way, at the World Cups, it's always the song, people holding hands, right? It's the whole world is coming together. That's why they invented Santa Claus. I hate to break it to you, but they did create Santa Claus way back in the day, right? They made him red and white, and they figured if we can own Christmas, that's more sales. But you can't build strategy around happiness. So what you need is a rally cry. So the visionary state is we want people to be happier. But let's have something where we can rally around. So here's their internal rally cry. They don't publish this, but it's phenomenal. It's to be an arm's reach of desire. If someone's thirsty in your organization, athletes, parents, there should be a Coke machine there, whether it's water or Powerade, right? Now, from their perspective, I'm not saying you, they're looking at everything, arm's reach of desire. That's why they had to get into water, because they were getting shut out of schools. That's why they got into orange juice, because they weren't at the breakfast table. So what you can do is you can build strategy. They always ask themselves at every meeting, are we in arm's reach of desire? So if you go to a grocery store, they want to be in 10 different locations. So when you see the pizza, you see a Coke machine. Even on your way out in the parking lot, you see the Coke machine. arm's reach of desire. We're going to try to help you create your rally cries because it really, really changes everything. We had the epiphany, the Oprah Winfrey aha moment at the Ottawa Sport Council when we landed on ours, which is we believe there should only be positive experiences in sport. That's why we exist. If you're having a great one, we want to learn from you so we can share to others. If you're having bad ones, that's where we want to jump in, whether it's to advocate, educate, find a way to give back. You know what's great? Marcia can manage her board, her key stakeholders, the city, Trillium, because everybody knows we do three things. It's simple, it's clear, it's instructional. If it doesn't fit in that, we don't do it. We point people to other ways or other direction. For some people, once you land on the, let's call it on that thing that's going to drive us forward, the rally cry, you could call it vision, mission. I'm not going to get lost in words, but ultimately, if I open the door, what's everybody charging towards? Can be a game changer. Some of you might already have a great alignment and something you're driving towards. And if all this did is validate it because you still did pictures and you still landed on that, that's very strategic. There's a place to check in. Some of you might be a little bit of I'll use the word pivot a bit. And for some of you, it might be a complete transformation. You might say, look, this would change how we run our organization. This would change how we engage. You have to be crystal clear on who you are and who you're not. So a couple of things to consider. As you have your rally cry, so we look at that, we say, if that's our model, if that's our rally cry, let's analyze what we have and what we don't have. What we have to consider, though, as we're going to design ideas, is we always need to consider the user, right? So the athlete, the coach, the parent, because in strategy, if we design something that's great, but it's used the other way, it's going to fall apart. I always use the Disney example. I'm obsessed with Disney every time I go there and I work with them, is they have Imagineers. That's their marketers, their salespeople, their engineers. And for those of you I've worked with, you've heard me share this before. They will get their Imagineers on their knees wearing knee pads, walking or shuffling, or if they can't, obviously someone might be in a wheelchair, they might be, but going down Main Street, USA. Why would they get people doing that? Why are they doing that? Imagine that, knee pads, on their knees, shuffling down Main Street, USA in Orlando. Why are they doing that? To get the perspective of the 5-year-old, because that's all that matters. And you know what happens? To this day, they will notice stuff like, when the fireworks were there, we noticed that every parent had their kid on their shoulders because the castle was blocking half the firework. We need to change that. The windows were too high, so the kid couldn't see the candies. Got to reduce that. The kid that had trouble hearing, or the kid that had, could be anything. We didn't design it properly. A lot of times the problem is, and I'm guilty of this, our greatest strength, we're passionate. Our greatest weakness, we're passionate. The story's not tight enough. We don't have a strategic plan that says, if you do this, it's going to lead to that. We're going to solve this youth problem in Ottawa. Right? So again, what we have to do is we have to make it easy for others to say yes. And one thing I always say is, the golden rule in life is treat others the way you want to be treated. That's probably why we have so many problems right now. It's not good enough. I have no idea what your background is, your values, your race, your religion, your what you lived through throughout your sports career. So the platinum rule, as you can imagine, is imagine if you treated others the way they want to be treated. So that's leveling up with your members. That's leveling up with your key stakeholders. That's leveling up with your parents. That's leveling up with the kids. So again, just consider, because as I'm going to get you working, I want you to consider these things. The design matters. Platinum rule matters. But this is where I think you can separate yourself within your model. You start getting this strategic, you watch how stuff is going to flow your way. And that could even be a facility. Now, here's how the model works. You have a rally cry. If you haven't landed on it, that's okay. So think of your picture, all the things on the picture. How would you organize it using this model? And this is how it's going to work. 70% of what you do in your organization, according to this model, should be the stuff that's table stake, the core. It's your core. Of course, your small changes all the time. That's your core. 20% of what you do is calculated risk. I should be doing this. I just haven't done it, but I should be automating registration because we waste so much time on it. I'm just using that. And 10% is a Hail Mary, to use a football analogy. I'm just going to throw it 80 yards down the field, and I have no idea if anybody's going to catch it. Here's what we know with people that have embraced this. The 10% in the last 10 years has outperformed the 90%. You know, I'm going to use an example. I'm going to use Uber. Just everybody knows Uber, right? 70% of what they do is just trying to get the app right and get the drivers to show up, rate each other, and constantly improve that experience. 20% is autonomous cars. They've had a lot of starts and stops. I mean, you probably watched 2 years ago, that lady was killed in Arizona where initially they thought it was a malfunction, but at the end they said no human could have stopped that. It was 12 o'clock at night. She was not even wearing bright clothes, and she was lost, and the autonomous car hit into her. Even though there was a driver in it, he couldn't react. And 10%, by the way, Google actually publishes their 70-20-10. Some big nonprofits will publish this. So again, this is how Google organizes their time, energy, effort. Yeah, of course, they've got resources that you don't, but they still put it in boxes. I'm just going to show you something for a sec, because I don't think I can do it justice. So I'm just going to show you the Uber 10%. Basically, when they launched this site, it was called Uber Elevate, they didn't even know how they would make this happen. They didn't have technology, it didn't exist. They said, no one's ever going to approve this. What city's going to approve this? You know what's happened? They put it out there. A bunch of people, obviously, technologists, played around. Last year, at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, pre-pandemic, that device was there. It was there. So it now exists. It gets better. They cut a deal with Sheikh Mohammed in Dubai because he's saying my city's a gridlock anyways. They cut a deal in Dallas and now San Fran. 2023, these things are going to be out. Now, yes, they have money, resources. You know how they had the idea? 3 kids at Uber were in Sao Paulo in Brazil. And it was insane because a lot of people rent helicopters. So imagine 10 of us renting a helicopter, because if not, you're in your car 8 hours. It's a gridlock. And they said, forget Uber. We need something going upwards. And they hacked this as their 10 percentile. This is going to totally disrupt transportation. Now, the biggest challenge is policy, insurance, everything else, air and all of that. But I'm going to encourage you, stay focused on your 70%. You got to keep the lights on. We got to survive this pandemic. Don't lose your spirit around the 20 and 10 though. That's how you impact people. That's how that person is going to give back and tell 10 friends. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. This is the hardest part of the whole exercise. You've got a rally cry or you've got energy that you've created, right? With a bunch of visual. What are some ideas as it relates to 70% that you could do to get you closer to that new vision? What are some 20% ideas? Calculated risk, we've talked about, we've just never done it. And the 10% is what is one or two Hail Marys? If you have a rally cry, it's a lot easier to come up with ideas. Like if your arms reach the desire, it's a lot easier to do 70, 20, 10. If you don't, use the energy from your pictures or the current rally cry you have. And then as the ideas evolve after lunch, we'll tighten your rally cry. All ideas are good at this stage. Here's the rule to yourself. All you should be saying is yes and. There's no bad ideas. Don't crush it. Because when we put the priority matrix, you're going to crush most of your ideas. You're going to be like, we've already tried that. It didn't work. We don't have money. We don't have time. You'll crush. We're really good at being spirit crushers as humans. When you come back, I want to see like at least 5 to 7 ideas for each bucket. It could be launching a podcast. It could be a partnership with someone here. It could be a finance campaign. It could be introducing a new sport on top of your sport. It could be, I don't know, partnering with someone in the US that does the same thing. And finally, it's time to partner. Whatever that is, okay? All opportunities or possibilities at this point. Having different types of ideas will help you organize them in a second, is really when you take another step forward in your strategic journey. You make it easy for others to want to say yes to your ideas, to want to cheer for you, support you. So we are part of communities, right? The greater sport community and then your own little communities. And the opportunity I think that exists in front of us that really excites me is engaging our community in different ways than we did before. So one of the things we did at Hockey Shot is everybody was stuck at home. And we knew that if they had a basement, they could try the challenge, which is try to hit as many targets as you can in your basement, and you have to record it in 45 seconds. And by the way, we'll get NHL pros to do the same thing. So suddenly we create a community out of New Brunswick, a town of 50 people, and we got people in Sweden doing the community challenge. Think of basketball. We might not have indoor access, but on my street, every single person put a hoop, including myself. I don't know. Where's the shooting star 50-second challenge? How many free throws? So you have to get a family member to record it, and then you submit it in. And suddenly we've created a global challenge. And I don't know, maybe it's 25 cents. You submit it, and the top 3 get a prize. Suddenly it's a fundraiser. Where I'm seeing a massive opportunity is social. The best stories are going to get rewarded. And I think all of you have opportunities to dial that up in your let's call it storytelling. I learned a very valuable lesson from Mr. Peter Herndorf, that was the CEO of the National Arts Center. And the one thing Peter did well is even when he had no money or resources, he always found a way to at least commit a little bit towards the 10%. So here's what happened. He saw governments go conservative, liberal. He had to kind of stay in the middle. But he always had shovel-ready projects. So when the Liberals took power and they said, okay, we got to spend, he had the $30 million blueprint on what the NEC needed to upgrade their facility. Do you know there was 10 other places the money should have went, but no one was ready. They all had a concept. He said, here's the blueprint. The sound system's been approved from Boston, blah, 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 blah. So what he did is he always scraped together a few pennies from every department to have shovel-ready projects. I'll use Marcia as an example. When she started the sports council with a group of people, people said, this has been tried before, it won't work, all the things, right. So Marcia, let's do the napkin test for a second. So what's your rally cry? What are you driving towards? What does everybody know you're doing?
We believe there should only be positive experiences in sport.
Okay. You could be pulled left, right, center. 3 things. What's your 3 strategies and how do you organize your 70-20-10?
So we educate for 70%, we advocate for 20%, and we give for 10%. And the give is our endowment fund, which many of you are aware of. It was a Hail Mary because we are not a charity. So to figure out how to give money was probably one of the most difficult things we had to do. We partner with Through Sport to be able to do it. We want to change that model. So like you want to build facilities, we want to change that model so that we can get more people involved in sport. So it consumes 10% of our time. 20% of our time is the advocacy piece, but our core bread and butter, the value that we provide to our members is through educational events such as this.
But the reason this is important is if Marcia, even though she's a great person, loves sports, if you've worked with her, her heart's in sport, right? But that doesn't make it easy for others to say yes. What makes it easy to say yes is when she puts a grant to Trillium and says, here's what we do. And by the way, that's why we're recording it. Here's what we got out of it. Next time the money doubles. Every time we've looked for funding, Marcia finds a way to get it because it's crystal clear why we exist and what we're doing. And all of you, your why is probably even more powerful than the why of the Sport Council. But it needs to be instructional. It needs to be easy to follow.
And it gives you permission, as Julien said before, to say no. I teased Julien and a bunch of our board members. When we first started the Sport Council, people would sit around the table and I called them all idea fairies. Oh, we should do this and we should do this and we should do this. And, and like, there was me. And I kept saying, well, we have to pick what we're going to do. So by having the 70-20-10 and our 3 things, if it doesn't fall into those buckets, it might be a great idea, but we are not the leader of that. We will partner with somebody to enable it. That is not our role. And that it gives you the permission to say no, which I think, as Julien said, it's as important because if you're saying no to something, you're saying yes to something else that's more important.
And remember this, and this is hard being an entrepreneur, and I've learned this. I've had great ideas or I've seen great ideas that are not funded. It's not the best idea or solution that wins. It's the best story that wins. And that's why creating social capital. I was working with artists the other day that are all committed to climate change. And they said, we've got 50,000 petitions. That's a big number. But 50,000 means what? We're so used to numbers. And then they said, what if we got 50,000 people to hold hands post-COVID and record that? I said, well, I'll tell you what, now you've got attention. That's very different, 50,000 people actually saying we believe this than just 50,000 people signing a piece of paper. So again, whatever your idea is, after lunch, we're going to try to amplify these and organize them. Hopefully you're getting clear on your rally cry, on your true north, right? Pointing in that direction. Here's how we're going to organize our 3 buckets. I would consider, do you have a 70-20-10 rule within that? Now you've got a bunch of ideas though. So you might have 9 ideas, 10 ideas. How do you prioritize? When you say yes to something, what are you saying no to? You're going to always have a bunch of ideas. And in theory, if it doesn't fit in your 3 strategies, then you know what? You might want to consider maybe put it in the parking lot because it's going to detract from the energy you're trying to drive forward. I love this simple tool, and you would have seen different variations of this, probably in school and other stuff you've done in life, but I love this one. It's the Boston Matrix, and it's as simple as this. You have your rally cry, you've got your 3 buckets, your 3 strategies. Now you got to make decisions on what you're going to do. Plot all your ideas on a graph. Big prize, small prize. Cheap, easy to do. Hard, expensive to do. Now, here's how this would play out. Obviously, if it's quadrant 1, gang, you probably should leave right now. Like you probably say, I'm done. I got what I needed out of this little day. because I got to go do that. The prize is actually big for my association or my business, and it's easy and inexpensive. I just, for whatever reason, it didn't trigger, right? So that podcast, I'm going to go shoot my first one tonight. And then tomorrow I'm going to dump it into the software and I'm going to publish it on Monday, right? Now, if it's quadrant 2, you want to look at it, but you cannot do 5 of these. It'll crush you. That's probably the one big idea you have at 10% or 20% that you're going to chip away at all year. But don't let that consume you because you're going to lose as well. So you got to balance. Number 3, of course you want to grab those. They're momentum builders. Little mo turns into big mo, right? The problem is we actually spend a lot of time in quadrant 4 without realizing it. I'm using the words here. This is not... Time waster is probably the wrong word, but really they're not the right things to be driving your organization forward. Maybe it would be better said. So big prize, smaller prize, in the context of your rally cry, always. And that's how you would organize your energy. So here's what I would say. Rally cry, 3 strategies, and for each strategy, probably no more than 3 to 5 tactics every year, 3 to 5 actions. And how you check in every year, how you check in at the end of the day is you run it through the priority matrix. And I'll tell you, if you refreshed your vision or your rally cry, it might mean that something that was a priority last year is no longer a priority. So you have to shift. And then obviously you'll look at all the slides, right? Then you would make an option tree, right? So who's going to do what, where, when, how? Like obviously that's how you drive that accountability. This is probably the one thing we don't do as well as we could in sport. I know being around sport my whole life, having run sports organizations as a volunteer, especially when I was in New Brunswick and heavily involved in a few sports, we didn't do a good job of measuring what matters. We didn't really have KPIs. We didn't really, we say, well, I think people are engaged, but we didn't do an employee engagement survey, or we didn't do a member employee engagement survey. We didn't have brainstorming session with the members so they come up with the ideas and then they actually put more effort into making it a success. So here's what I'm going to ask you. If you had to land on a few metrics, whether it's quantitative, qualitative, what would they be based on everything that you've looked at today? We've got a lot of ideas, but if we don't measure along the way, we won't know. What is it? Fail fast, right? Build, measure, learn. Try a thing, throw it out there, new program, new idea. Learn, measure it. If it didn't work, start again. But we need to hold ourselves accountable. That's where I think it falls apart a lot of times. So KPIs are important, key performance indicators or something tangible. Peter Drucker once said, the famous management guru, I love this. He said, there's nothing worse than getting the right answer to the wrong question. So the reason you want to have your KPIs and something to measure along the way is you want to move the needle. I want to do one last thing because I think this is where you really separate the great from the world class. I had seen a couple of my clients in technology use this because it really started with Andy Grove, that was the CEO of Intel. And he also became a teacher. And Intel, to this day, people are still studying how well it was run and how focused it was and aligned and the culture and all that good stuff that came with it. And they basically had a monopoly at one point. They still do, I guess, because they're in every computer, it feels like. But he managed everything by OKRs. And here's just an example of how OKRs could work. Now, he uses a professional football team example, but this is anything. Is having a page on a plan or having a plan on a page. So this notion that everything cascades up. So for instance, if you're the executive director, or if you're the volunteer president, or if you're the owner of your organization, you have an objective. You have a couple of key results that you're trying to drive for the year. And then that would funnel down. So what is your coach? What is your head coach? Or what is your program director or coordinator? What's their OKRs? If you had a marketer, or if you had a volunteer marketer, if you had a board. But this notion that everything aligns. Because the risk is, especially if you don't have a lot of resources, you don't have a lot of funding, you're a couple of volunteers trying to, patchwork this thing together at night as a side hustle or as a labor of love, you forget what is being done, what's not being done. This is just a way to organize. And then when you would have meetings, whether it's quarterly meetings or annual meetings, you would go back to your OKRs. Now, it's not for everybody, but I can tell you the people that embrace it, I just finished reading the book. I'm implementing that in all my projects and businesses, because who doesn't want to have a napkin that tells you what you're going to do in the next 12 months, and then to have it all on one sheet organized in terms of how I'm going to make sure that I measure what matters. And then the last thing, there's only one thing left after that. What's their story? What's their elevator pitch? Right? What's the elevator pitch to, you might have different elevator pitch, obviously, to your athletes, to coaches, to government, through whoever. But what is the elevator pitch? And that's where we're going to finish. We're going to finish with storytelling that inspires action. A good elevator pitch talks about what? What is the opportunity for, soccer? I'll use that very generic. Why? What's the insight here? So what? And then now what? Here's the beauty. If you can answer all four, you've made it easy for the other side to say yes. Most times we answer 2 to 3. The other person's very nice. Oh, I like you. I like what you're doing. Keep it up. I'm going to fight the good fight for you. Nothing happens. Nothing happens because they can't deliver that pitch to their boss or their funder. You got to remember, everybody has someone they got to convince. So what we're trying to do, there's a theme here, is everything is on one page, whether it's your strategic plan, whether it's your elevator pitch, whether it's your OKRs or your KPIs, whatever metrics. They asked Winston Churchill, I love this one, can you speak now? He said, if I have an hour, I'm ready to go. If I have 2 minutes, I need 2 weeks to prepare. It is very hard to boil down a big idea, strategic thinking, in literally an elevator pitch. But at least with these 4 questions, as you work your way through, you got a chance to keep it tight, right? And the reason the insight's important, it's the hook, the why, right? That hook's important. You don't hook me in the story, you've lost me. If you were to boil that down to an elevator pitch, like here's what we're driving towards, right? My insight is, I don't know, we have an opportunity to do something that's never been done, whatever the insight is. So what? We're going to need an advisory board. We're going to need a different partner. Now what? We're going to create, I'm just picking a blueprint so that it's shovel ready, whatever the idea is. Okay. So again, this is just to help you work through it. I promised you that we would go from vision to action. So this is vision, action, story. Try to come up with a 2-minute elevator pitch to summarize your rally cry, your 3 strategies, and maybe your metrics. And now what? Like, what does that mean for others, right? Why should people care that you're actually doing this, that you're actually trying to move the envelope forward, push the envelope forward? At the end of the day, here's what every good story needs to have. A hook within the first 30 seconds, an engagement, so a couple of questions that they have that you've answered, and then a call to action. So as you're thinking through your strategic thinking, make it easy for others to follow you. My last words of advice is keep fighting the good fight. And thank you for fighting the good fight, because sports have been so good to me. And thank God we have a vibrant sport community here in Ottawa that my family can take advantage of, whether it's swimming, cross-country skiing, all of it. Fall in love with the process and good results will happen.